Ladies and gentlemen.
I can't really heard what Jeremy says because I got my 2 Stanley Cup rings plugged in my ear.
Introduce.
This is a guy that's going to be traded, though.
You're an announcer with a long stick from time to time.
You think it's my fault? Is that what you're saying? This guy's such an idiot here.
The Puck Luck Fantasy Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Puck Luck Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Derek Sudemans, and today I'll be breaking down the 2 games for tonight on DraftKings. I'm going to remind you to check out our website, puckluckfantasy.com, where we have our skater and stack rankings, as well as some goalie rankings, some line matching stuff, and lots of other cool tools that you can check out while you're making your lineups. While you're there, throw your email in so you can check out when we have the latest updates, as well as you'll be eligible for a discount on a subscription next season. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at PuckLuckFantasy, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can find us on your favorite podcasting platform. We're on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. So without further ado, let's get into the first 2 games. The first one we have is between the Washington Capitals and the Pittsburgh Penguins. We're expecting Braden Holtby will be starting against Matt Murray. And this is a day where sort of the goaltenders in general, there's not a lot of difference between the best one and the worst one in terms of value. So if you're playing tournaments, that's exactly what you want, because that means you can literally play any goalie that pairs up with the rest of your line. So it's not so great for cash, but the main goalie does come out of this game, which is Matt Murray. I'm going to give him just a tiny edge over Connor Hellebuck just for cash games, but really both of those 2 goaltenders are almost identical in terms of value for like the top one overall. So really it's hard to say for cash, but for tournaments, definitely you can play any one of these goalies. Just look for whoever fits best with your lines. That being said, jumping into the line stacks from this game, there's a couple that I am going to be targeting. As of right now, it doesn't look like Malkin is in the lineup. I'm going to have to keep an eye on that because if he does come back, that may change my plans here. But with him being out, even though Pittsburgh is back at home, I expect Washington will try to get the Ovechkin line against the depth. Although since they're on the road now, the Backstrom line will probably be seeing a little bit more of Pittsburgh's depth, and that makes them a little bit more valuable tonight. However, they don't really show up super high on our rankings, so the one I'm really mostly targeting the top line for Washington. Ovechkin is great even just as an individual player. 7.7K is a really good price for him, especially in these playoff times where he's even getting maybe a slight boost in those key situations and a little extra power play time and such. So Ovechkin's in another great spot there. Kuznetsov is coming up in price a little bit, but our model still has them more. They're sort of more of a bubble play today for sure, but they would probably be the one that I will be going to if I do get. I'll get at least a couple of them tonight. On the Pittsburgh side of things, there are a couple of lines that we do like. However, they are sort of the more depth lines because they're going to be getting a bit more minutes and such, and that's why their value is sort of bumping up. Oh, I am noticing Malkin is projected back here on this latest update here. So it looks like the lines will now be Rust, Simone, and Malkin on line 2, and then Kessel, Sheary, and Brassard on the 3rd line. So that actually does make the 3rd line playable. If you can get Phil Kessel and then Sheary and Brassard, they are all a decent price right now. I know Phil Kessel has been individually dropping quite a bit, so he's the one individually that sort of is the most valuable. So he's definitely playable. Yeah, this makes it a lot more interesting now with Malkin back. So I'm not really going to be targeting the Malkin line. They will be right bubble play as well. So it's a little bit tough. The top line is in decent shape again with Crosby, Hornqvist, and Gensel. It's more of all of the Pittsburgh lines are sort of bubble plays today. They're not my favorites, but definitely if you need them to fit with salary, you can take any of them because we know the Washington defense has definitely been exposed quite a bit in this game. So that's really the main plays that I see sort of shaking out of this game. I already sort of mentioned the matchups, but it's going to be It's going to be a little bit of Crosby against the Ovechkin line, and I think it won't be a super hard matchup, though. It'll probably be a soft matchup, so it'll be a little bit of everybody seeing everybody, I think, but we'll have to see how things roll out. All right, and that will... so going to defensemen from this game, however, there are definitely a couple that we can play. The main one would be from Pittsburgh, actually, which is Olli Määttä still. He gets a slight edge over Chris Letang. I like both of those, though, individually. So especially if you're rounding off your lineup, Chris Letang is a good one to stick in there because he's got a higher ceiling there. It's mostly just those two, though. I was looking for John Carlson, who's usually up there. So he's definitely still playable. He's not quite as high. He's just sort of slowly increasing in price. He's only at 5.7, so he's definitely good if you're going to pair him with the top line of the Capitals here. Even with the second line, you get the Backstrom correlation there, so that could work as well. But really, I'm not super high on any of the other real defense from Washington. Niskanen always pops up as well, but he's pretty cheap, but you can play him as well if you need to. And that will pretty much wrap up the defense and the players in general for this game. So we'll move on to the next game, which is between the Predators and the Jets. We expect Rinne to be starting. He's at 8K today, and he'll be going against Hellebuck, who's at 8.1. And so, like I mentioned earlier, both of these goalies are pretty much the same value. There's a tiny bit of a difference between them, but really, either one of these are basically a coin flip at this point in terms of value. Once you mix in all of the expected shots against and the win score and all of that, so there's no real obvious choice here. So either one will work. And this is where I'm going to be going for most of my players. So we'll definitely be getting a few of these goalies, and it works really well. I'll probably have maybe a little bit more of half of my lines will pair with the goalies from this game, and then the other half will sort of be paired with the goalies from the other game. Ideally, it'll see how it all shake out, but that's sort of what you want to go for if you're building multiple lineups on any given day. You want to get a sort of a nice little spread there if you can. It really just more depends on where the value is, though. In particular, you got to sort of concentrate your lineups around the value and sort of try to take advantage of that when it's possible, especially on these days where there is only a few games. Makes it very tricky. So the stacks from this game, the top one is once again Kevin Fiala, Kyle Turris, and Craig Smith. So they get a slight edge over the top line of Nashville. So I really like them. And since they didn't have as big of a night as the top line did the last game, they should be a little bit less owned, I believe. So I'm going to be heavily targeting them. And then I'm still going to be getting a really significant chunk of the top line as well, because they're the second rated line of the day. I really like them. So Winnipeg does have a good defense, but we've seen that they've just been able to keep cruising. The top line, they still have a really good value. They're a lot cheaper than they were earlier in the year. So you're getting a lot of value from Nashville all over the place, really, especially even with their defensemen. Roman Josi is down to 5.5K, which is really, really cheap. PK Subban is down to 5K, which is really cheap. Even Ryan Ellis is at 4.7K. So it's like all of the Nashville players are super valuable tonight. So I'm going to be getting a lot of them. And even some of the Winnipeg players are very valuable tonight as well. So just to break down the Nashville matchups with the defensemen and the lines, to make that clear, if you're going with the top line of Forsberg, Arvidsson, and Johansson, you want to pair that with PK Subban. And then if you're going with Craig Smith, Kevin Fiala, and Kyle Turris, you're going to want to use either Josi or Ellis. Either of those will work. And one other thing I could mention really quick is I noticed I was looking at sort of the power play statistics, and more specifically how many penalties each team takes. And I did notice that the Jets took the most by far shorthanded, or they took the most penalties. They were shorthanded the most out of any team by quite a bit. Now that hasn't really carried over so far to the playoffs, but I still do expect they should get more than average number of penalties. So this is kind of an area where you might be able to expose want to target a power play. So you definitely want to be pairing those defensemen with your stacks if you're going to Nashville, I would say, for tonight. On the Winnipeg side of things, the top line that comes out is the Connor, Blake Wheeler, and Mark Scheifele. And they are actually the third overall line in terms of value tonight. So we expect it's basically going to be line 1 versus line 1, 2 versus 2, 3 versus 3, and 4 versus 4 tonight for the most part. That seems to be what it has been shaking down as for these last few games. The Winnipeg just has so much depth that and they don't really avoid line matching, and it makes sense because they have so many weapons offensively. So they kind of almost use their top line as their shutdown line just to get the sort of easier matchups for the line A, Stastny and Ehlers line. So really, they're usually used as the attacking line. They also do pop up. I don't like them still, just not quite as much as the top line, but they're definitely playable, especially if they fit with your line. I still like Trouba and Byfuglien both a lot on defense. So Byfuglien's on the first power play unit, and then Trouba is not really seeing any power play time, but you can use him for sure as a one-off. He works great for that sort of thing. I think actually Trouba might be listed on the second power play unit now, so have to keep an eye on that. If that's true, definitely want to get him in there. And that's really the only plays in terms of the defense and how to pair them with the stacks. All right, so now it's time for the Puck Luck picks of the day, where I'm going to give you my favorite players in terms of sort of a really expensive, a medium expensive, medium cheap, and super cheap player. And this is all in terms of value. So at the top, I'm going to be going back to Alex Ovechkin today at 7.7K. He's not quite as valuable with Malkin returning, but he's still at a pretty good price. And there's not a lot of guys really at the top end there that I do like. So going to have to go with him. In terms of sort of a second tier there, I'm going to go with Victor Arvidsson at 5.6K. So that's really cheap for him. I like Craig Smith at 4.4K, which is extremely cheap for him. So he's sort of in that third tier. And then as a really cheap player, I had Dominic Simone, because he will be playing with Malkin now on the second line. So that gives him quite a bit of a boost there. So it's not the best play, but he's a pretty decent value play on the lower end there. In terms of my top overall stack, I'm going to be going once again with the Kevin Fiala, Kyle Turris, and Craig Smith. They should see the lower ownership today, so that should be key. If they can go off, that'll be great. And then I'm going to be going with Josi and Fiala for my mini stack of the day. And that will wrap things up. I'm going to remind you to once again check out our website, puckluckfantasy.com. Make sure you check out our stacks and rankings there, goalie rankings, all that fun stuff. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at puckluckfantasy, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on your favorite podcasting platform. Thank you for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.